This is the new Sigma 24-70 version 2. It is a little bit smaller, a little bit lighter weight, and a little bit better in almost every avenue. But is it worth it over some of the other competitors as well as the first version? Let's check it out. So as always, this was sent to me by Sigma. I have to send it back basically as soon as the embargo lifts on this thing. But we'll have it in Leica L mount, although they are also making it in Sony E mounts. And I'm going to talk about the size and weight in a little bit and compare it to a few of the other offerings. I will be doing that in Leica L mounts because that is the copy that I have. But the Sony E mount is usually about 10 grams or so lighter, probably just because of how the mounting system works on there. So just keep that in mind, that the performance, everything like that is going to be the same between the two. So if you do have a Sony or a Leica L mount camera, this will be available for both. Now, most professionals, when they're thinking of just a standard zoom lens, that is going to be a 24-70. 24 gets you wide enough that for most photographic things, at least, you are going to be totally fine and be able to cover more than enough stuff. For years, my widest was a 35, but I've definitely realized how nice something even like a 24 is. And then 70, while not very telephoto, it's still kind of like a mid-range, is still going to be able to allow you to zoom in enough. 2.8 is going to be enough to get you a lot of light in a lot of different situations. So especially for weddings, events, things like that, you will often see, I'm sure that this is probably, like, by statistics, the wedding photographer's most used lens. Now, I personally haven't owned a zoom lens in a long time outside of two very, very distinct examples here. The first of which being the Sigma 28-70. I'm assuming this is how I even got on Sigma's radar in the first place, talking about how much I really love this lens, mostly because it is a fast aperture standard zoom lens, but it comes in at a package and a size that is significantly smaller than the vast majority of zoom lenses out there. It does have a few issues with it, one of them being that it only goes down to 28 millimeters versus 24, which may not seem like a big deal, but it kind of is. And then it's a good lens, but it's not like their art series. And the new 24-70 is definitely in their art series. So while I don't have their version 1 in hand, a few of the things that jumped out to me right away is that the front of this actually seems like it's very similar in design to the first version, which is also similar to the Leica version, as well as even like the new Sony versions have a little bit larger of a front here to have just a massive front element. It's going to take 82 millimeter filter threads. And right off the bat, I can definitely tell that it is lighter. And by statistics, it is lighter by about 90 grams over the version 1. And I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that it's not necessarily, I don't even know if it's shorter, but it definitely is a little bit thinner and feels a lot more balanced in the hand, even when just holding it by the grip than the initial version did. And obviously that is a very welcome improvement. This lens isn't going to give you anything that is going to be like super impressive. It's just like a very, very great do-it-all lens. You're not going to get crazy shallow depth of field. You're not going to get crazy distortions or anything weird. It's just a great all-around lens. So one of the things I wanted to do is just kind of take some basic images to see the sharpness as well as the out of focus characteristics. So I just put a little focus test chart on a tripod because I wanted to see how sharp the lens was, as well as see the background images at different focal lengths. So I went at 24, at 35, at 50, and at 70, and tried to place the focus chart in the exact same spots. So you can see that it is plenty sharp, basically no issues with any of those things. I'm definitely moving my body to keep that test chart to be about the same size in the frame, but then that also makes it so the background is going to be varied. You can definitely see that in all of these, it doesn't have a lot of like swirly bokeh. It doesn't have a lot of cat's eye going on. It's just a very, very good, well-rounded lens. And from all of those aspects, absolutely like on a professional level. This is the Lumix S5 II. It also has the newest firmware. And in terms of focus tracking and autofocus, it seemed very, very snappy. It's definitely something that if I was going to be shooting sports with this system, absolutely would be more than fine with using this lens. It also has all of Sigma's latest and greatest design things. So you have 2 focus hold buttons slash whatever you want them to do. Almost always I stick these onto APS-C crop mode on my Sony cameras to allow me to just get some instant reach if I need a little bit extra. It also has an AF/MF switch. It has a typical aperture ring, which is great. It allows you to click or declick, and it has a lock button as well. Everything on this just feels fantastic. So when I was first looking at this too, I thought, oh my gosh, this is so much bigger than the 28-70. And it feels like that for sure, but they aren't actually that far off in terms of size. I think it's just that the 28-70 here is so small on the front end as well that it really makes that part of the difference. It's basically the same size on the lens, except for you just have this added big piece on the front here with those huge front elements, which is fine. And I think a very, very reasonable trade-off to get those extra 4 millimeters. Now, a quick little kind of comparison in terms of sizing and stuff. I just figured I'd kind of throw in a few different things here that might make some sense and give you a relative idea, because I do think that the sizing is going to be something that is pretty interesting. So here we have the 28-70, the Sony E-mount version. Obviously, we have the 24-70 version 2, Sigma's DGDN art lens. Then we have this massive beast of the Samyang 35-150, and then we just have the 35 1.4 GM. And you can see that the 24-70, for what it is not actually very big. And if we're going to compare this in size and weight to the other 24-70s out on the market, mostly for the Sony E and Leica L mount, because those are the ones that I currently own. The original Sigma version 1 is 385 grams. This new one is 745 grams. The Sigma 28-70, if you want to go in that direction, is 470 grams. So that's where you're getting a significant weight savings. The Sony version 1 is 886 grams, so almost going to be the heaviest in the group here. Their new version, though, is 695 grams, so it's going to be, 40 grams lighter than this is on the Sony E-mount. And obviously at probably about double the price or so, probably about $1,000 more, you can decide if that is worth it to you or not. And then the Leica 24-70, which I've heard a lot is basically the original Sigma 24-70, comes in at 856 grams. And then the Lumix, the S Pro 24-70, comes in at 935 grams. So it's definitely the largest, heaviest of the group there. Now, one of the things that I don't really talk a lot about on this channel, and often isn't really something I run into when I'm doing my photography work, is the longitudinal chromatic aberration. I wouldn't even know what that was called, except for the guys at Now the Petapixel channel, Jordan and Chris Nichols. They always talk about this. And on the 28-70, I had been using this as like my primary B-roll lens, and had been using it for a lot of things outside of just photography. In photography, I don't really notice this because I don't usually use it close up. But when close up, it has really weird chromatic aberration that I really don't like. And unfortunately, this new 24-70 2.8 version 2 also exhibits those same things. So I took a photo at the minimum focusing distance, both at 24 and at 70 millimeters, both on this and on the 28-70. And you'll see that regardless of the focal length, both of them exhibit some really weird coloring there. Normally, you get that annoying magenta and green. Here you're getting like a blue and like an orange. And the 28-70 really is really ugly. And then the 24-70 here, we almost have like a full like rainbow kind of effect going on. And it's one of those things where in photo mode, you can like kind of go in Photoshop and desaturate all those things. But in video, it's like almost impossible to get out unless you really want to go frame by frame and try to get that stuff out. So I will say that these are both fantastic lenses, and this is fantastic as well for sure. But if one of your primary use cases is going to be some very close-up detail stuff, you just at least have to know that that's going to be a thing. And you can decide on whether or not that is going to be a deal breaker for you or not. So really, there's not like a ton to it. It is just a great, worthy upgrade from Sigma on an already very, very popular lens. If I was going to kind of make a decision between these two lenses or some other lenses out here, here's kind of where I'm at. If you were going to be doing primarily video work, I would absolutely go for the 24-70 version 2. It is a little bit heavier, but in video, that's actually kind of nice because it allows you to get a little bit more steady footage. At the price point, I don't even know what it is, but it's definitely going to be cheaper than the Sony, not being very much bigger. And it's obviously going to be cheaper than the other options out there for the Leica L mount as well. It also comes in at a very low relative size. It's no 28-70, but it is pretty small and lightweight, pretty balanced. I would not have much of an issue carrying this around. And then that 24-70 focal length is just going to be especially a little bit better for video, where that difference between 28 and 24 on video can be a huge difference in getting a little bit more in your frame, but also allowing you to have slightly more steady footage. As the wider you get, the easier it is to make your footage look steady. Now, if you are a photographer like myself, I still really love this lens because of how small and lightweight it is. And it just gives me the ability to basically use the size of a prime lens, but have the ability to have a zoom lens that still is plenty sharp. I personally don't need to worry about things like that chromatic aberration in my photo work because that's not really what I'm doing with this lens. And so if you are okay with 28 millimeters being your widest focal length, I think it is a very, very good option, especially because you are also going to be getting it at a lower price point than the 24-70 version 2 or version 1. All that to say, great lens. I think it's going to be super popular. Thanks again to Sigma for sending this out. And if you are interested in seeing more about the 28-70, you can check that out up here. Check out a video that YouTube thinks you should watch up here, and I will see you in one of those videos.